All right, everybody that is joining us, thank you so much. We have people entering the meeting still, so we are going to wait just a few moments before we officially get started. Let this attendance level tabletop off, and then we'll get started from there. So if you'll bear with us for about 30 seconds, I'd sure appreciate it, and we'll get started. All right, the attendance level's starting to tabletop off here. Definitely appreciate you joining and waiting with us just for a moment. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MAD Security's May Town Hall. I'm Adam Starnes, account manager here at MAD Security. I take care of our current clients, assist with additional services, manage renewals, and ensure that you're getting 100% of what we promised you and more. I'm really glad that you're joining us today. As always, thank you so much for taking the time out of your Thursday to be here. For those of you who continue to join us month after month, we do truly appreciate it. But if this is your first time joining us, we are absolutely glad you're here. Hope you come back to see us as we continue on. We do this every month. 2 months ago, we had Jeff from Realm One join us, and he shared his live testimonial on how MAD Security helps them achieve CMMC Level 2 certification. If you want to see that, you can go to the YouTube page, MAD Security's YouTube. You can actually go back and watch that or any previous town halls if you missed it. Then last month, we zoomed out. We talked about where organizations stand after Q1, what we're seeing on average, common things that were happening, and whether you're actually on track. So it was basically something looking back, saying what you planned from January to now, where are you at? Are you on track for where you want to be? Some people said yes, and that's great. Some people said no, not exactly, and that's okay too, because that's what we can do is help you get right back on track to where you want to go. Most important thing is that you keep making progress, keep moving forward. So today we're going to talk about taking the next step because what we're seeing right now is this: CMMC is not just about tools anymore. It's about structure. Who does what? Who owns what? And how everything works together. So in today's town hall, I'm going to be joined by Scott Hutcheson. He's the former SOC desk manager here at MAD Security, and now he is part of the GRC team and the virtual compliance manager team. Jacqueline Jones, that is usually with us, she is GRC lead. Scott is part of that team. We're definitely glad to have him here. He is going to be able to have a security operations and a compliance perspective on everything that we talk about and understands what works in real environments in real life. So, Scott, definitely glad to have you with me today.
Thanks.
All right. So, one of the biggest misunderstandings we see in organizations, or one of the biggest misunderstandings that I see is that when an organization tries to do everything under one roof, same team handling IT, security, compliance, and audit preparation. On paper, that sounds efficient, but in reality, it can create risk because CMMC is not just about doing the work, it's about how it's implemented, how it's validated, and how it's proven during an audit. So, Scott, what separates an organization that does this well from the ones that don't whenever like one team owns everything?
One thing we typically see is just a lack of checks and balances. When one team owns everything, they're reviewing their own work, and that's where you can miss things. It's not that they don't care. It's just there's no second layer of validation there. There can be gaps between the documentation of how the company wants things to be done and then how things are actually implemented. We do see that, and CMMC requires you not only to do that work for the implementation, but to prove that you're doing that, and then that matching your documentation. That's where it becomes a lot harder without that separation.
Yeah, I totally agree. We see it with clients all across the board all the time. Um, okay, yeah, no, let's go ahead and move forward. I believe let's talk a little bit about IT versus cybersecurity. Let's define something clearly here. IT and cybersecurity are not the same thing. IT focuses on uptime, user support, system functionality. Cybersecurity focuses on threat detection, monitoring, response, control validation, both are critical. So we're not taking away from either side. You definitely have to have both, but both definitely require different skill sets and focus. Scott, where do you see the biggest gaps when IT is expected to fully own cybersecurity as well?
That part's difficult. The IT team is typically going to be focused on keeping your business running. Security is watching for those anomalies that shouldn't be occurring in your environment. That's a completely different mindset, and we see a lot with security becoming reactive instead of proactive. Your IT team they just have a lot of competing priorities, and they don't have as much time to do those threat hunts, to go out and look for the things that may not be showing up on an alert board or something like that. It's not that IT can't do it. It's that it's just a lot to expect them to do both of those and at a high level and be effective for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, guys, all the listeners that are here with us today don't want to take away from either skill set. IT and cybersecurity are both extremely important. You've got your IT that's used to licensing, maybe setting up a VDI, different things that they do. Maybe it's even fixing the printers or the help desk. And then you've got your cybersecurity team that's actually doing the security, and their train's different. It's kind of like we've used the analogy before. It's kind of like you don't go to the dentist for your back problems, right? So it's just a difference of expertise. So that's typically what we see whenever separating out what's IT, what's cybersecurity, and who should handle what. Should definitely go to whoever's the expert in that particular field. So when IT and security are blended together, because we do see it often, we often see things like alert fatigue, missed threats that could have been caught, documentation gaps. Maybe it's documentation gaps on how something's implemented, or something else that you have to think of is, does the IT provider have it documented correctly for your security practices, documented correctly for CMMC purposes? Are they a CMMC expert as well? We also see weak validation of controls. From a CMMC perspective, that does create audit risk, because now the same team that is implementing the controls is also validating the controls. Scott, what usually happens operationally when there's no separation between implementation and validation?
It's really about that independent validation. Whenever we're looking at different setups, what you'll see is something's not set up correctly, or it's set up correctly and it's not documented, or it's been documented, but the implementation may not have gone in completely the way it's written. And an auditor an assessor is going to light up on that immediately. You have to prove what you're doing, and you have to clearly communicate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Scott just adds a big point. I'm glad he brought that up. In the audit, you're going to have to be able to do three things. You're going to have to be able to show that it's implemented. You're going to have the evidence/documentation to show that it is indeed there. Make sure they match, right? It's got to match. You've got to say that it's implemented this way. This is what our documentation says that we do. And you got to be able to speak to it in the actual audit itself. So it's not enough to be able to do one of those three things, or two of those three things, but all three, to make sure that you can actually pass the audit. So yeah, I'm definitely glad that you brought that up. So as we all know, just like every doctor is not made for every particular health practice, not all MSPs or all MSSPs are built for CMMC. A CMMC-ready MSP should understand secure configurations, align the systems with documentation, support evidence generation, work with compliance teams. Before I come on to a question for Scott, I actually want to dig into one of these here. We do have some clients, because MAD Security, by the way, just so you know for your own knowledge, we're agnostic. We work with things that you have in place. So let's say you're really stuck to whoever your SOC provider is, or whoever that you use for user awareness training, and you don't want to change. That's totally fine. We don't require you to say, come scrap everything that you have and come to Mad Security. We say, come as you are. We're going to help you fill in those gaps to get to where you want to go. But everybody asks us the question, how do I know that my provider is going to be CMMC ready? Well, one thing that you can do is you can ask for the support evidence. You can say, hey, I need the documentation on this. I need you to provide me with a shared responsibility matrix on what you're responsible for and how you're doing these things for these controls that are implemented. So what I would say here is that you can ask them to support you with that evidence. If they can't, then that's something that might be a flag too, or maybe you could even have them talk to us as well and we could explain exactly what they mean. But that's one way that you could know if your MSP or MSSP is CMMC ready. So Scott, what is it that separates an MSP that's just a standard MSP from one that's truly CMMC ready?
Absolutely. A standard MSP is really going to be focused on your uptime, your support, closing your tickets out, which is incredibly important to keep your business running. A CMMC aware MSP understands how their configurations tie into compliance. They're setting this up and they're doing their documentation with that in mind. They know that how it's set up matters, not just that it's working for you. They also understand that all of the evidence that has to be shown during an assessment and how their work shows up during an audit is important. And that awareness is what is going to make that assessment go smoother for you because it's set up with that in mind in the beginning.
Absolutely. All right, so a true MSSP does more than monitor logs. They provide continuous monitoring and detection, incident response alignment, audit ready reporting and evidence, control validation support, and more. What is the biggest misconception about MSSPs that you hear or see, Scott?
Basically that, an MSSP is just monitoring alerts, in a SIEM. In reality, it's about curating rules for detection, investigating alerts, and doing threat investigations based on intel. And then in the event of an incident, going through the response with you. From a compliance standpoint, it's about being able to prove what's been happening over time. They're going to want to see logs from different aspects from different periods of time. So it's not just about seeing those alerts. It's documenting how those are handled and showing consistency to the assessor.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that consistency to the assessor that Scott just mentioned, that is going to be key. You've got to be consistent. Anytime that something seems a little bit off in the process, they could raise more flags, they'll dig in, they'll start looking for more information. Consistency is going to be key for sure. Something that we didn't really have planned to talk much about today, but as we were going through this, I thought that it would be appropriate to do so. Not as a pitch in a sense for Mad Security. Mad Security does do this, but I mean for the sake of you evaluating your current stance and your current providers that you have in place. You need to make sure that your MSP or MSSPs, again, are familiar with CMMC. If you do have somebody that's a SOC provider, if you do have somebody that's doing your endpoint detection or vulnerability management or user awareness training, those are all things that are going to be technologies and different services that you could use, whether if you do it internally or use a third party, they're going to meet controls. So you just need to make sure that those providers, yes, they understand those services and they understand the security side of things, but also that those providers do know how to explain how those do meet CMMC controls to an auditor in that situation. Again, as I mentioned in the last slide, talking about things like supporting evidence that goes along to say this is how we meet those controls for you. That's going to understand both the security and the compliance side for you. And the hard part really is that if you're trying to do all three, you've got MSP doing your IT, your security, and your compliance side of things. You got to make sure that they can understand it, that they've got good answers for how they're separating those duties out, and just make sure that they have a good explanation for how you're going to be able to explain those requirements to the auditor. So that is just a little something else there that I wanted to add to versus somebody that's CMMC focused. Mad Security's been working towards CMMC readiness. We've been experts on this for ever since we knew CMMC was going to be a thing. Like back 2017, we were already kind of heavy in it. We saw it coming, started preparing for it. You want somebody that focuses on that. You want somebody that has focus on the defense industrial base, that's focused on DoD, that's in this line of work, that eat, lives, breathes, sleeps it. And that's what you really want whenever you're having to rely on your MSP or your MSSP for CMMC purposes. So sorry to kind of go down the rabbit hole there a little bit with you, but thought that was a great place to kind of insert some of those thoughts there. Okay, so organizations typically fall into one of three paths, or maybe a combination. Either one, they do everything internally. So especially with larger companies, you typically see they'll have a IT director, and they have cybersecurity analysts, and they have IT teams and cybersecurity teams. We've even seen some companies that are really big decide to build their own security operations centers. So they do everything internally. Then we see on a second category somebody that uses a MSP and MSSP combination. Again, and what the difference there is the MSP is typically providing their IT services. They're doing things like help desk, they're doing implementation, they're doing licensing, and the MSSP is doing the cybersecurity and compliance side. And then you have a all-in-one provider. That is the third category that we typically see them fall into. So they do everything in-house. They have an MSP, MSSP combo, or they have an all-in-one provider. Each has its pros and cons, and every company's different, but structure matters more than simplicity. Scott, in the real-world environments, what tends to work best from what you've seen so far?
Well, like you said, it really depends on that organization. What the size is, what resources they have, and the experience. Some companies can do this internally if they have the right people and time, but what we see most often is that combination where your IT or an MSP handles implementation, MSSP does that monitoring and validation piece, and that gives you a little specialization and separation, which is really what CMMC is driving toward.
Yeah, I agree. And for those of you that are listening, I have to be careful about doing this sometimes. I assume that everybody here understands what MSP and MSSP combination is, and there are some of you that have probably lived and breathed this for just as long as I've been living, for instance, that are joining us here today. So I know some of you totally understand it, but for those of you that don't, because we do run into people that we talk to every single week, and they don't quite understand what I mean by the MSP or the MSSP or maybe even the IT and cybersecurity. So I just want to briefly dive into that just a little bit. What the difference here would be is, and what you would use each for, and you'll learn a little bit more about next month. I'll set you up with what next month is going to look like at the end here today. Is that just an example of real world examples here? MSSP. So Mad Security is an MSSP. We may do your SOC providing, your SOC services, your 24/7 monitoring. So we have a security operations reviewing your network. We're looking for threats. We're looking for anomalies. We're looking for anything that looks unusual. And then What we're doing is we are responding, and we're either shutting a threat down, or maybe we have to contact the client to say, we're seeing something in your network that looks unusual. We need you to investigate this and shut it down. What the options here are is that if you're doing everything IT internally and you're using us for your security side, then we would call your internal IT team and would say, hey, we're seeing this. Is this a false positive, or is this something that's really going on here? They jump in and they do it. All right. The use of the MSP and the MSSP would look like this. So you're the client, you have an MSP here, you have an MSSP here, and the MSSP sees the threat. So they would copy you in, but they're actually contacting the MSP to investigate the alert for you. And then the MSP is doing the hands-on keyboard remediation to get that threat gone and out of there. So we're doing the security in the alert portion, they're getting it out of there. That's one example. Another example may be we do vulnerability scans with vulnerability management. We send you over the reports of the high vulnerabilities that you do have in your environment. Your MSP actually goes and does the patchwork. So that's what we mean here. And the reason that that's important, and the reason it's important to have that separated out, or that I'm suggesting that it is, sometimes it's okay for you all in one, again, according to the organization and the story and what the goals are. But the reason we've harped so much on the separation of duties is because, let's say we do your vulnerability management scanning, because we're doing that service for you. We scan for the vulnerability. We say, okay, here are the vulnerabilities. And then the guy down the hall is patching it. And we could say that we're going down to check behind it, but nobody's actually coming in to check behind them to see if it's done. To whenever in the combination, whenever you've got an MSP and an MSSP that's used to working together, or even one that's not, we do work with clients that have an MSP in place already and they can keep the same one, but it's still a checks and balances system. Then we could send the vulnerabilities over to the MSP. They actually do the remediation steps that need to take place. Us as the MSSP would come back behind it again and validate that the patch actually held and that vulnerability is no longer there. And that's what we mean by the checks and balances in the system, is there's always somebody to check behind the other to make sure that something was actually done. So I just wanted to kind of point that out because I assumed by the statements that I made here that everybody understood that. So just wanted to kind of jump in. Once we get to the Q&A, if you have more questions on that, please feel free to ask, and we'll continue to answer questions from there. All right, moving on. So when IT, security, and compliance are separated, you get clear accountability, you get stronger oversight, you get better audit defensibility. Scott, how does separation improve both compliance and security outcomes?
Look, it creates some clarity around the ownership. Everyone knows what they're responsible for, and it can improve communication because you're all working for the same goal. Those teams have to stay aligned. From an audit perspective, it's a lot easier to explain and validate who's doing which piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. And again, what you said there in that last sentence or two that you said is super important, that you've got to be able to explain who's doing what, the separation of duties. That's why, like with MAD Security, we give all of our clients a shared responsibility matrix that shows we're responsible for X, the client's responsible for Y, their MSP is responsible for Z. These are all what we handle, and then we show the evidence that we're actually doing things the way that we say we are during the audit time. So, yeah, no, definitely agree with you there, Scott. All right. So this, we've got the slide here titled for you, what's the right MSP and MSSP combo look like? The one thing that I get feedback for sometimes is I'll be talking to a client, what do you want to do? And they say, I want an all-in-one solution for many reasons. Most of the time so that it's seamless. They've got one person to come back to if they have an issue. It just seems like the efficient thing to do. Now, we've talked about many reasons today to why that may not be the best bet to do. Maybe it's an expertise level, because maybe, let's say, people that usually do IT for you, maybe that they just do some different security services on the side. Maybe that's not them. And the same thing for cybersecurity. We may be a great SOC provider, but we're not going to know how to tell you to get back in your computer that you got locked out of the same way the IT company can. So those are different reasons that some people may decide that they want the all-in-one solution when they looked at it. Well, we've talked about a few reasons why we propose differently. But what the right MSP and the MSSP combo would look like is that it feels seamless to the client. So on the client side, on your side, you've got an MSP and you've got an MSSP, and we work together. And as far as you're concerned, it really doesn't give you any more anxiety. It doesn't give you any more tasks to have to go take care of. We are so used to working together in an MSP and an MSSP, not just Mad Security, but anybody that's CMMC focused, and they're both working towards the same goal and they're used to working together, can still seem seamless to the client side. So it feels like it's all in one, but then you're not losing out the checks and balances. So it should feel seamless to the client. Behind the scenes roles are clearly defined. They're communicated. Communication is structured on how it's going to go. Like during this scenario, we're going to contact the MSP, but we're also going to copy in the client, or the client wants contacted first on this. We create a playbook to how the communication is actually going to go. And responsibilities are totally understood. So again, we're going to share the shared responsibility matrix. We're going to have a clear understanding on the MSP does this, the MSSP does this, the client does this. So the best partnerships, of course, understand CMMC. That's going to be like one of the most important keys here, is that you want them to be able to understand CMMC, know how to implement controls, they can produce and defend evidence, and they work together like one team. Scott, what does a well-functioning MSP and MSSP relationship look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, that's going to come down to like what the communication level is, and just clarity in each one's role. Clear roles, clear handoffs through your onboarding, all the way through full implementation and into an assessment, and just regular communication. Both sides need to understand what the environment looks like and how their responsibilities connect in that environment. From client perspective, it should feel simple. We know that there are a lot of moving pieces in each company, but you have this structure behind it to, as you said, kind of alleviate that anxiety.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's just it, right? I get it. Somebody's probably had a bad experience with their MSP and their MSSP working together. That's why we're talking about now, what things to look for whenever having that combo. Just so you know, like Mad Security has some different partners that we actually work with. One's going to come on next week, and we'll talk about how we work together to create that seamless experience for the client. And just being able to have that is so great. So don't always think that everybody doing everything, IT, cybersecurity, compliance in-house is always the best route. It could be. You got to go make that determination on yourself depending on what you want there. But there are ways to do it to where you can still keep those duties separated and it still feels seamless. All right. So again, this is not just about passing the original assessment. This is about maintaining compliance over time. After the C3PAO assessment or DIPCAC, depending on where you're going through, you still need monitoring. You're going to need documentation updates. You're going to need to keep up with your evidence, and you're going to need ongoing validation. You're going to see things like new revisions come out. You're going to see somebody made a change that you weren't sure about, and you never went back and checked until the next audit rolls around and something has changed. So you're going to need ongoing validation. What happens after the final assessment, or I should say the initial assessment, Scott, if the structure isn't built correctly?
Things tend to drift pretty quickly. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle change type of scenario. Documentation can fall out of sync if they're not if any changes in your environment aren't tracked properly. Controls can kind of fall away and not be maintained consistently. So, if those things happen, whenever it's time to recertify, it feels like you're starting over. It feels like that first time. This has to be maintained. This is something that you're going to do long term. It's not, once every 3 years we're going to tear everything down and start from scratch. This is something that you're going to be doing, every month. You're going to be going in, reviewing, making sure everything is up to date, and working with that team to do that.
Absolutely, for sure. And the right MSP, MSSP combo can help you do just that. So, with that being said, I appreciate you, Scott. It's been a great conversation. I hope you listeners have had some great information that's come in, something that's helpful or useful to you and deciding what MSP, MSSP team or, maybe what type of structure looks right for you. Now we are actually going to go ahead and roll over to the live Q&A. You can go ahead in the Q&A section and submit all the questions that you do have for us. We'll answer as many as we can live. I will tell you that there have been times often that we get more in than we can fit into the time allotted. So if we cannot get to your question, be ensured that before the day's over, we're going to respond to you and go ahead and start getting you some information on the question that you asked. So don't feel like any question is too much. You just go ahead and bring them to us. We'll get back to you as quick as we can if we cannot live. With that being said, we'll go ahead and start here. Scott, if you're ready, Scott's going to be here to answer questions for us in the Q&A, so please go ahead and get those submitted. Got a few here, and we'll just start from the order that I've got them. All right. Question number 1 came in from a gentleman. Can our current MSP just handle everything for CMMC?
That's a good question. One that we do hear quite often. MSPs can definitely handle portions of that. Most are built around that IT operations, so you have to make sure that they're going to be able to cover that continuous security monitoring and then the validation for compliance. CMMC requires ongoing monitoring, evidence generation, and the ability to prove those controls are working over time. So that's typically where you see like an MSSP come in. It's not about replacing an MSP. It's just about making sure that it's validated and all of those responsibilities are covered.
Absolutely, I agree for sure. All right, good question. Thank you for that question. All right, let's go on to the next one here. A lady asked, what is the real risk of using one provider for everything?
It's, like we've talked about here, it's about that lack of separation. It's who's watching the watchman scenario. If the same team is implementing and doing the monitoring and validating controls, you lose oversight, you lose independence. Whenever we're looking at, just from the audit perspective, there can be some concerns there. From security, you can get blind spots, something that may have gone unnoticed, and there's not a second set of eyes, second point of validation to go in and give you those checks and balances. So in that, you kind of win on both compliance and security.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, great question again. Thank you. We appreciate all the questions that you have. Anything you need clarity on, just go ahead and get those submitted. We're going to keep going here. We're going to answer questions for the next 6 or 7 minutes before we move on. We do still have some giveaways for you, so hang around for those as well. But hopefully you'll get some questions here that'll answer some things that you may need clarity on as well. We kind of answered this one during the presentation a little bit, but Scott, maybe you have some more thoughts on it. Is an MSP and an MSSP combo more complicated to manage than doing somebody that does all on one?
It definitely can sound like it would be at first. If it's set up correctly, you can simplify things. just from my experiences, it's about laying out key, clear roles and communication paths. Making sure that all the people on the team, whether it's internal or MSP to MSSP, how that communication path works, what the cadence is, and what the expectations are there. Um, from your side, everyone should be one team. Responsibilities are separated behind the scenes, but from your perspective, everyone should operate in a one team scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be. Again, it's the right team, right? If you've got the wrong MSP, wrong MSSP combo, one of the two's not familiar with CMMC, it can get it can get tough. And if one of them doesn't know the clear expectations on what the other one's doing, it can be. So that's all we've talked about today. It definitely needs to be the right team, but it can definitely go really smooth and seamless for you. Okay, so this is a good question as well. We talked about this is one of 3 categories that somebody can fall into. Another lady here asked, can we realistically do this internally instead?
Sure. There are a lot of organizations that can, if they have the right experience and bandwidth. This is, they're just the documentation side of this can be a heavy lift. Most underestimate what's involved, and it's not just about implementing, it's maintaining what that control requires, making sure your documentation matches that, and then being able to produce evidence when it comes time to go through that assessment. And on top of that, I know Adam mentioned this earlier, is you have to defend it during the audit as well. If you have to explain, not all auditors are going to be technical, so sometimes you're going to have to defend how you have your implementation set up and explain that to the auditor, and that's where your internal team can get stretched in.
Excuse me. Yeah. Scott knows he's part of the GRC team. We've been through some audits as MAD Security, some of these C3PAO assessments to where C3PAO didn't have a clear understanding of the way that something was done, and it was done in a compliant fashion. Excuse me. But you've got to be able to show how it's implemented. You got to be able to have it documented, and you've got to be able to explain it, just like Scott said. And all of those things are important. So if you can do those things and you've got the bandwidth and everything for that, then yeah, you could absolutely do it internally. But we see oftentimes for the return on investment or for the simplicity of it, that unless you're extremely large, that a lot of times small to medium and even some of the smaller large companies see that outsourcing it could be the better answer. But again, it just comes down to what you're doing and how your company's set up. All right, I think we're going to be able to squeeze a couple more here in. Thanks again so much for submitting these. I love it whenever we have everybody interacting and submitting questions. Next question in line here was, okay, we kind of answered this too, but I think this is very important. What should we look for in the right MSP or MSSP?
For both, whenever you're looking for these roles, look for CMMC experience. If you know this is going to be a requirement that's being pushed down to you, you're going to have to be, say, level 2 certified. You're going to want a partner that understands those controls and how to implement them correctly. That, like we talked about before, they have the mindset of creating the correct documentation, and their processes are going to check those boxes for you. And then those that can speak to those controls during an assessment, that's a big piece of it. So that's being able to explain and defend what's there is going to be critical for you. So those are the types of things you need to look for.
Absolutely. So I will say this. I said I'd do them in order. I am going to skip a couple just because I do think that we either answered them with some of these other questions or during the assessment. But if we don't get yours right now, we are going to get back to you afterwards. But for the sake of answering something a little bit different, we're going to go on down to another one a gentleman had asked here. And it says, when should we start thinking about restructuring our team?
That's a good question. It's probably earlier than most people think. If you wait until right before an audit and you're, say you have implementation gaps and you're starting to try to change structure under a time crunch, uh, that is going to be unnecessary pressure for everyone on the team. Organizations that do do this well, are starting to build their structure so it's operating consistently long before that audit happens. You're going to want to have all of these things in place so that you can show a track record that you're doing this, that you're scanning for vulnerabilities, you're remediating vulnerabilities, and you're tracking how those things are done, how they're checked off, so that during that audit you can prove that you're doing this. It's not just about we're going to do this long enough for the audit. You're going to want to show that you're actually doing what you say you do in that SSP.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, yeah, and again, we had one, two, three. We had at least three of them that we did not get to. We are going to have to move on just because I'm going to be respectful every time and not keep you too far over before we get to those giveaways. So we will reach back out to you if we didn't. If you still have a question, you're like, oh, wow, I just now thought of this, go ahead, submit it still before we end this so we can get back to you after. Definitely want to be there and answer those questions for you. So we're going to get to the giveaways here for you today. You're gonna all get a copy of this sent to you afterwards. So you do have the free pre-assessment here. This is going to be CMMC related. It's going to be an assessment that you can answer 31 questions, yes, no, or unsure. And it's going to give you a good idea on where you are for CMMC compliance readiness. If you can't answer these questions, and then we may have something to talk about here. The next giveaway is going to be the free CMMC Master Bundle. It's going to have several things like how to approach CMMC compliance readiness as a government contractor, all the way to enclaves, and several other things that you could really use. That's just going to have a lot of educational tools and things that you can use to make sure that your company is indeed ready. You're going to have the free CMMC assessment guide, and it's actually not necessarily talking about preparation from control implementation standpoint, but more for you are about ready to go. What do I need to make sure I have in place before I actually get to be certified? And then the last thing on here that you can use is the free consultation. So you can either email me or you can use the HubSpot link that is actually going to go straight to my calendar. And then that's going to put time on there. We could put 15 to 30 minutes to just have a brief conversation around what you are currently doing right now. No matter if you're wanting to talk about or you want to switch MSPs or MSSPs, or you want new cybersecurity services, like you're looking for another 24/7, 365 SOC SIM provider. Maybe you're looking for vulnerability management and anything in between there. Or maybe you're saying, hey, I'm in the CMMC boat. We're just now starting the journey, or we're halfway there and we need help finishing, or we think we're done and need validation. Wherever you're at, let's at least have the conversation, because the goal of that initial conversation is to determine if we can help you. And if we can, great, we can talk about next steps. If we cannot, then we'll simply provide any sort of guidance that we can, maybe a recommendation on who to talk to that would be able to help you with wherever you are currently sitting in your situation. So again, use the email, use the link, book that at any time. Definitely be my pleasure to have that initial conversation with you. And with that being said, those giveaways again will be emailed out to you. I want to thank you so much again for joining Scott and I here today on this May town hall. If there's one takeaway, it's this: CMMC is not just about tools, or it's not about hiring someone and saying, here you go, handle it all for me. It's about the right structured team. CMMC focused, right structured team. And while every organization is different, what we consistently see work best is having an MSSP handle cybersecurity and compliance guidance, and either an internal IT team or a CMMC aware MSP handling implementation. That gives you separation, specialization, accountability that CMMC is looking for. On June 18th, which is going to be next month's town hall, it's the third Thursday of each month, we'll take this one step further and we'll walk through how an MSP, Pinnacle Business Solutions, and an MSSP, MAD Security, have worked together in a real world environment, including how responsibilities are separated while working seamlessly together, and we're fulfilling a client's IT, cybersecurity, and compliance needs. Two, seamless as one. Make sure that you're going to be there. You don't want to miss it. You're going to have the opportunity to ask questions live to both MAD Security and to Pinnacle Business Solutions. Thanks again, and we will see you there next month. Have a great day.